Welcome to the Casey Ingram Show, Meet Your Candidate series. No spin, no agenda, no endorsements, just the candidate. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the many listeners who submitted questions for this interview. Several of those questions have been incorporated into today's discussion. Questions are not shared with the candidates prior to the interview. If you enjoy the show and would like to stay informed on local issues and elections, be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'm Casey Ingram. Let's get into it. Christia Li Roberts is running for Martin County School Board, District 1. Welcome to the show, Christia.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Appreciate you taking time today to get to know you a little bit more, although you are the incumbent school board member. So I know we have a little bit of a track record to know you already, but these are fun interviews to get to know you a little bit more. And starting with that, of course, can you tell viewers a little bit about yourself, what life experiences and qualifications have prepared you to serve on the Martin County School Board?
Sure, happy to. I've been in Martin County about 46 years. I'm an economics major from Loyola in Baltimore. I'm the daughter of two Navy officers and the wife of a Navy nuclear submariner. His 3 children graduated from Martin County High School, and 2 grandchildren graduated from Jensen Beach High School. I've been involved in the community. I think I counted up. I have tens of thousands of hours of volunteer work over the last 3 or 4 decades. So I came into this role. I've kind of embraced it. I have a lot of qualifications that I've gotten from that and from my training from that. One is the Certified School Board Member, which is something that the Florida School Boards Association gives you to acknowledge you're doing the training to be a part of a good governance team. I'm actually an advanced certified board member. I was invited to attend and be a part of Florida Leadership Class 3, which involved people from around the state, not just educators, but community people, et cetera, to discuss best practices around the world and nationally, the direction of education, and where you can make improvements. And most recently, I was elected the chair of the Florida School Labor Relations Services, which is a group of 8 school board members and 8 school superintendents around the state that deal with collective bargaining and labor relations matters. So in my term here, I've spent a lot of time preparing, a lot of time being present. I believe I have the experience. I believe that the continuity is important, and I believe that I've proven myself both as a leader and as somebody who can work together on a team with other people to build a consensus.
Impressive resume. You answered my next question, but I'll go with the second part. The question is, did your children attend or do they currently attend Martin County Public Schools? If so, the second part is, how has that experience shaped your views on public education?
So I'm not sure it's necessarily changed my views on public education. I believe the animal of public education or the industry of public education is different in the state of Florida. I never realized before children were in the school system, grandchildren were in the school system, that there are a different set of rules and that it varies from state to state. I had a little bit of that knowledge because being a Navy child, we traveled around. So oftentimes the sequencing of events or the sequencings of courses would not be consistent from state to state. So moving, say, from California to Maryland, you might be getting world history 2 years in a row because they flip-flopped it from the other state. So that was a little bit of a clue, but I didn't realize really until I got into the job how much different the budgeting is and how much different the money is and what that really looks like in Florida.
So Martin County schools generally perform well compared to many districts across Florida. What do you believe the district is doing well, and where do you see the greatest opportunity for improvement?
Okay, so when I first came on the school board, my first full year that I was in office, we had 5 A schools, 5 B schools, 9 C schools, so about half. And then we had a district rating of a B. So now our grades have just been released this morning. We have 11 A schools, 4 B schools, 5 C schools, and our district rating is now an A, including, which we should be very proud of, Indiantown Middle School has gone up to an A, which is really good news. So your question was, what do we do well? We have been known, so during that period of time that I've been here, we've been through various standards, different standards that have changed in the state of Florida as they're constantly updating what the state feels children should learn and what children should be exposed to. As that has happened, we have been known throughout the state, ever since I've been on the board, is we can teach more of 1 year of content in a year. We can help. We have the ability to instruct children in a larger capacity than what other districts around the state are able to do, which is really good news. It's good news because if you are behind, if you're in fourth grade reading at the second grade level and you consistently just keep learning 1 year's worth of work each year, you will always be 2 years behind. So we're able to catch up because of the ability to do that. The state has kind of embraced that in the last year or so with this progress monitoring that they do now. Instead of making everything dependent on a test at the end of the year, there's a benchmark test at the beginning of the year, a test halfway through, which is supposed to help drive what instruction would look like for each individual child, and then a test at the end of the year to see what the growth has been. In Martin County, we've been using a system where it's like on a monthly basis, the children, especially in elementary, take a quiz and kind of shows where they are and where their gaps are so that we can respond much quicker. I believe that the results that you're seeing have a lot to do with that work. One is being able to identify exactly what a child needs. The second is empowering the teacher and letting the teacher have the supports and understand what it is that that child needs to do. So it may be pulling small groups, which means gathering a small group of students to read aloud. It may be focusing on phonics. It may be focusing on number sense in the math world. But those type of small groups of individualized instruction really help, and it's something that we do really well. I think our challenge becomes, it's kind of a two-piece challenge. One is you're constantly having to update what it is a child needs. So that causes a kind of shift in how you're doing things. So that's one challenge. So I think another challenge is probably, I don't want to say the population that we have, but we're meeting each child where they are. So as we meet each child where they are, you have a variety of children coming from a variety of different backgrounds, and you really don't know somebody's history until you've walked in their shoes. So that creates another kind of added challenge to it. We have done one thing that I hear out in the community repeatedly has to do with teacher retention, has to do with teacher turnover, and those type of things. And I've been tracking that for years, and that really isn't the issue. You do see it in other districts around the state, where you see, oh, we're having a massive financial crisis and we need to cut 400 teachers or we need to lay people off. We really don't have that issue here. The amount of teachers that we have, the vacancies that we have are less than 3% on an ongoing basis from month to month. That information is reported to the board every week, and that usually runs between 20 to 30 teachers. And some of that could be somebody moved, somebody got injured, somebody left, that type of thing. And so the good news is that we can track that to be able to tell, for instance, if it's a physics teacher at a high school level that remains open for a period of time, that we have the ability now with our contract to do a critical shortage announcement at the board level and then add additional incentives to try to get somebody to fill that job. Or I know that in cases where there've been that vacancy, we've had somebody from the district who is qualified to go in and pick up the work in that classroom so the children can keep on learning.
Very interesting. You have a lot of metrics that you're able to work off of. And one thing that you were talking about is doing the monthly assessments. Has that really helped improve those reading scores that were so low? I know that they have improved in the schools. I would think that would be one area in particular it really benefited from the monthly assessment.
It does. In the downtown district office on the second floor, the superintendent this last year was focusing on 6 schools. It happened to be the 6 C-rated schools, and actually posted a wall with Post-it notes of what in that school, what the average score was in each of the schools for each of the grade level type things, which was really helpful because you could see that as they were progressing, you could see which schools were performing better. You could see which schools were lagging behind. You could kind of and I know they were using it to kind of find best practices to kind of find out what was happening where. But yes, it's very helpful. I don't want people to think of it as another high stakes test. There's nothing really tied to the test. I look at it more like your spelling quiz that you used to have every week when we were in school. You had 20 words that you were supposed to learn to spell, and they gave you a quiz to see what your comprehension and what you did for those 20 words.
Now, congratulations on the Indiantown A rating as well. That's exciting. All the scores coming up is exciting, but I know that you all have been working hard on that for quite a few years. With the One thing I wanted you to touch on is the languages within the school system. It's something that always kind of blows me away when I hear how many different languages you have to deal with in the district. Do you know what that figure is?
I'm not sure what the figure is, and it kind of changes from time to time. I do know that we have some new technology or some new hardware where we're not requiring a para to do the interpreting. We actually are using technology to help do some of that interpreting. So in real time, a student can hear in their language what the teacher is saying, which I think is helpful.
Fantastic. So, the next topic, fast scores and other academic metrics have shown improvement in the recent years. What specific actions would you support to continue accelerating student achievement? And please be specific as possible.
So I think we need to continue what we're doing. What we're doing seems to work. And one of the things I don't get really hung up on is I really don't get hung up on what a school grade is or what a district grade is. I'm more concerned with the learning for each individual child. So I think focusing on the individualized instruction, being able to identify what each child needs, that's something that even as a community, that's something in Martin County that we value. And it's something that's also reflected in our schools that we value that also. So it isn't so much your fast score was better, was worse, et cetera. It's that we understand and the district understands and the parents understand that there's some foundational knowledge that needs to happen. This isn't just a matter of memorizing something so you can spit it back so you can get a good grade. This is something that creates a lifelong learning experience for you where you're not scared of information, where it doesn't intimidate you. I hear people all the time say that I'm not a math person. And I'm like, I don't even understand that statement. I mean, you use math every day. Every one of us is a math person. Every one of us is a reading person. So, it's just a matter of how you use it and what fears have been instilled in you.
Teacher recruitment and retention are frequently discussed during campaigns. Beyond simply saying we need to support teachers, what specific policies or initiatives would you champion to attract and retain high quality educators?
So I think we're fortunate in Martin County that we do have very high quality educators, and we are a place that people want to come to work. I think we see that because we see a 2 to 3% vacancy rate on an ongoing basis. We pretty much hire about 15% new teachers every year, and we have about 10% of teachers that leave us. I don't think any of that is surprising given the way that the industry has changed. Industries across the whole world have changed and aren't the same as they were 5, 10, or 15 years ago. And teaching is also the same. So I think being a teacher a lot of times could be stressful, and I think is stressful because there's so much shifting sand and so much things that are changing on them all the time. So I think the better experience we can give to them, the more support we can give to them, the better off everyone is, and the more it's like giving you a foundation that you can stand on. So one of the things is a consistency. So I think a consistency in here's the curriculum materials, here's the expectation of what we are expecting you to do, here's the way that we can help you analyze where each of these individualized students are so we can offer the individualized instruction that's needed in today's world. I also think that this year's code of conduct, we've replaced one of the focus area of cell phones. Since we've removed the cell phones from the schools, we've changed that C so that we had the ABC, attendance, bullying, and with cell phones. Now it's attendance, bullying, and it's classroom management or classroom behavior. And what that looks like is in the code of conduct, it used to just have interventions. If you misbehaved or if somebody did something wrong, there was an intervention. But now, in addition to intervention, there's also consequences. And the consequences vary depending on whether you're in elementary, middle, or high school. Those consequences also vary depending on whether it's a first time, second time, or third time. They'll be applied evenly across the district and evenly across a school. So it won't be that that you can throw a pencil and get nothing. I can throw a pencil and get the book thrown at me. We all know right up front what the punishment is or what the consequence is for throwing that pencil. And I think when teachers get that kind of support, it makes it a better atmosphere in which to teach in. It also improves what a parent can expect when they bring a child to school. One of the things that I think is very important is pay. In doing the pay, we have that additional millage, which adds the $1,000 per child back in that the voters approved. That gets reauthorized every 4 years. That will be up for reauthorization again in 2028. So And when we reauthorize, we're really reauthorizing 2 years further than what the period is when we reauthorize next. So when we're authorizing in 2028, if for some odd and unusual reason it did not pass, we still have 2 years of collections to wind ourselves down so that it isn't a cliff or a financial disaster that's happening to us that all of a sudden we don't have the ability to do that. So I think that helps too.
That's huge. That's definitely smart planning. Now, let's talk about the teacher salary because that's one of the narratives that's going around this campaign season. It always does, I should say. But the teacher salary, the starting pay is the highest on the Treasure Coast. So we fixed that. Ooh, that's great. How about the upper level for your teachers that have been, teaching for 5, 10, 15, 20 years?
Okay, so I'm going to break your question down into 2 parts, okay? So the first part is, yes, that is a starting teacher salary. The scale that you see in the salary book is if you come to us as a starting teacher. So Casey, let's say you and I are twin sisters and we both have 10 years of experience of teaching. And you have been with the Martin County School District for your 10 years. And I've been teaching at a private school or doing something else for 10 years. And I haven't been with the Martin County School District for 10 years, right? So when I come in, I would come in on that salary scale as a 10-year teacher. You, as a teacher who's already been here, are in most cases receiving more than what I would make coming in. So that's one piece that, and what we call it is when we look at that starting salary scale, we are real careful to be sure that we don't do something which we term as leapfrogging, which would mean that I coming in with 10 years of experience would be getting more money than you who've been with the Martin County School District for 10 years. So we don't want to leapfrog anyone because then what you would obviously do is you would resign and then rehire at the higher rate. So what's the point of that?
Right.
So we try to make sure that that piece fits in. So that's one piece of it. I think that when the governor added the TSIA money, the teacher salary incentive allocation, instructional allocation, what it did was by focusing it on bringing up the lowest pay to a minimum of 42.5, what it did was it flattened out the line, the salary line of what teachers make. So that a teacher who was coming in with 2 years of experience or a teacher who was at 2 years of experience was making just a little bit more than the teacher with the 1-year experience. And it really impacted that upper level. So you really saw, you can imagine a very flat line so that the salaries were very compressed. So that we've been trying to work on expanding that line and steepening the slope of that line. And by steepening the slope of that line, you get the distinction between the various teachers. The governor this year has come up with a plan where the TSIA money is going primarily to teachers who have more than the 10 years of experience. So he's trying to address it from there, but that doesn't really solve a line slope problem. The line slope problem can be solved with things like the millage, where in our case in Martin County, the millage stipend that you can get is larger for teachers with more experience and less for teachers with less experience. So you could imagine if the line was somewhat flat, by doing that, I've steepened the line somewhat, right?
Okay.
So that's what we're trying to do, is to get that line steeper. I think that a lot of times it's easy to say teachers should be paid more. I mean, that's easy to say. Everybody loves their teacher. Everybody thinks a teacher should be paid more, et cetera. I don't think necessarily people understand exactly what teachers are being paid and exactly what the gap is. 10 years ago, teachers were making $33,700 if you came in as a starting teacher. Now that's up to $51,300. What the state has discovered is the state discovered that the people coming into the profession, when we had a teacher shortage, people coming into the profession to teach were not necessarily teachers. And there were people without teaching experience. They weren't getting people from teachers' colleges. Those days have long since passed. It used to be that if you went to a teacher's college, the only thing you could be was a teacher. But now to be a teacher, you don't necessarily have to go to a teacher's college. Some of the best people to teach math are architects or engineers or those type of people.
Hmm.
So when you had people that are coming in without any teaching experience in a supply and demand workplace, your labor is being filled with people with less experience, and it tends to push the salary down, because if you're not really running, and I'm proud to say that in Martin County, even though we're running with a 2 to 3% vacancy, we still realize the need to pay our teachers well. We still realize the need to retain them. We still realize the need to make this a pleasant working experience and somewhere where they feel valued.
Can you also weigh in on the charter schools and the funding mechanism on that? I know a lot of folks out there, I've had questions submitted. Why does Martin County School District give money to the charter schools? And it's not, that's not really how it works. So you are well versed in this. Can you kind of explain why the funds go
Sure.
to charter schools?
So 1973 is the year, I looked it up the other day, so it's been over 50 years now, that the Florida developed the FEFP, the Florida Education Finance Program. And that's to pay for operational charges per child, right? For each child in school. Prior to that, it depended on your zip code. If you lived in a wealthier zip code, you had the ability to collect more in taxes to pay for education in your community than somebody else did. So to even that out, the state developed a system where there's a dollar amount per child. Dollar amount right now hovers around $9,000. So the dollar amount per child is $9,000, and we're paid per child. When I was saying earlier that we're in a defined revenue business, we're paid based on the number of children that we have in our care, the number of children that are coming to school with us. So if a child is going to a charter school, it doesn't take money away from us. There's a pot that determines there are X number of children in the state of Florida, and this X number of children are each going to get $9,000. Now, it got complicated a couple years ago with the expansion of the voucher program, because the voucher program then said not only charter students who are public school students, but not only charter students get the $9,000, you now are going to give $9,000 to a homeschool student, to a private school student, these other students. I tell people this is kind of like, imagine if the county had a boat ramp, and the revenue for the boat ramp was based on boat launchings. And every time you launched your boat, if you signed up to launch your boat for that year, the county paid $100. Somebody gave $100 to the boat launch business that was going to run that business, right? And that was because it was a county-run business. But now they've decided, oh, well, we don't care. If you have another boat ramp that you would rather be using, you still have access to that $100. So and you may go to the one that's next door to you. You may go to one that you've been paying for. You may change what you're doing. But what it does is it's still the $100 per boat or per boat customer that's being launched. So that amount per student is still the same amount per student. So when you added the vouchers or you add the charter schools, et cetera, you didn't change the number that we're going to get per student. So the only extrapolation to that, and I'm not talking capital, I'm talking operating, the only extrapolation to that is that you could lose a student. If a student decides to go somewhere else, to go to a charter school or to go seek educational opportunities elsewhere, you will no longer get their money. Same as if they moved to Georgia. Same as if they went to a private school. So the revenue that's defined to the Martin County School District that we have control over is defined on the number of children that we teach. To think that the state of Florida would take the revenue from voucher children and redistribute it, there's no mechanism in place to do that. The FEFP numbers and the formula for the FEFP are kind of like written into stone at this point, and that would have to be completely redone in order to make that possible. You could say that it's capital money. You could say that, well, they get capital money. They're not as accountable for their capital money, et cetera. And we're required to build schools, whether we should be building them or not. We're blessed in Martin County to have very secure structures, to have very well-built structures, and to have structures that meet the capacity of our students and to not have a fluctuating student population. Does that help?
It does. No, I appreciate you explaining that to folks, because I know a lot of people are frustrated. Why is the money being given to other schools when it should be remaining in the public school system. I don't know that I agree with it. It changes, it follows the student, and I understand that. But you do have, as you said, capital expenses, you have gymnasiums, you accept all students, that kind of thing, which I believe charter schools do as well. I don't know that private schools would, but charter does. So, there's just a lot of narrative out there of not understanding that the money that flows to charter schools or private schools through the voucher system, you don't really have a lot of say in that. That's under the state law, right?
Correct. So that just happens. I mean, that happens organically. I think that the main issue that happened, and that FEFP report that's available from the state, that report is trying to capture the cost of education in the state of Florida. It's not trying to capture the cost of public education. It's not trying to capture the cost of just the education, not including the charter children. It's trying to encompass and report on what the expenditure and what the money thrown in or placed in, invested in children in the state of Florida looks like. So they all get jumbled into that document. So until you start breaking the pieces out of the document and looking at them, it's harder to understand. And so then you think, well, look, there's this much more money. We should be getting more. An interesting thing about the funding per child. So when the big discussion came up recently about property taxes and about property tax reform, and initially schools were included in that property tax reform piece. Quite frankly, I was not the least bit concerned about it because the state of Florida cannot afford to reduce that per student amount from 9,000. So how would I go about telling you, whether you're a public school student, whether you're a student getting a voucher to send your child to a private school, how do I then say I value education, but the voucher I'm going to give you, I'm going to cut it by a third? It just doesn't have a narrative, and it doesn't ring true. So at the end of the day, I'm still operating under the premise of you have in place an FEFP structure where I am going to get funding per student. So unless you're going to throw that out the window and completely redo the FEFP, which would take longer than just a vote on the ballot that this is what we're going to do, we're going to continue to get money per student. And if we continue to get money per student, I don't see the state reducing that amount per student that we're going to get. And in order to make up that giant pot, there's only two places to get it. One is property tax, and the other one is from the state coffers. So if you reduce my local property tax and you make my collections less, it means the state's going to have to pick up the other piece, which they could afford for a couple years, but after that, they'd be dead in the water and not be able to do it. So it wasn't any surprise that we got carved out. The same way it wasn't any surprise that in your existing tax bill, the highest homestead exemption you can get is $25,000 for schools. Mm-hmm. It's not the 50, and it's not a higher number.
Thank you. Very, very clear explanation. Really appreciate that. Moving on to the next subject. Artificial intelligence is rapidly changing education. What role should AI play in Martin County classrooms, and where should limits be placed?
So we have a joke in my circle that AI is like having a maybe somewhat trained, but maybe not well-trained assistant. You're sending somebody out there to look for stuff, and where the person looks or where the AI looks depends on what you're going to get back. And it may be right and it may be wrong. I think technology is something that has changed the landscape of the way that just our whole society looks at things and the way that our society operates these days. I think AI adds a component to it where it's additional information, but everybody needs to realize it may not be true information. Just because you read it on the internet, just because you read spraying Windex on your broken bone was going to heal it, doesn't mean that it's really going to work. So I think that it's a matter of exposing them. We still expect children to do their own work. You can run it through something to get another opinion. You can see where else you can get it. But at the end of the day, it still needs to be your own work. There is another component of that, though, of the AI monster, which is these artificial people, which I think is artificial friends, which I think is very damaging mental health wise, that you think that you're a child without a fully developed brain, and you think you have this friend that's conversing with you, and it's not really a person. They look really intelligent and they sound really intelligent and they're coming across your computer, but it's a compilation of things that are favorable to you that somebody has figured out this is a way to feed to you. I look at that as that's an extension of when people used to meet people on the internet and they would say, "Oh, there's this really good-looking boy who lives the county over who I'm gonna go see." And it's like, "No, it's a creepy
Right.
70-year-old man who, like, weighs 500 pounds and was just pretending." He got the picture that he put up there on Facebook. So I think it's that same, we had that same problem then with children like, "No, no, no, I see his picture." It's like, that's not him. No. So I think it's the same thing of continuing to reinforce that what you see on the internet isn't really always a valid source. You need to source check what it is you're looking at.
Definitely. Definitely a tough balance with as rapidly as technology is changing these days. I'm sure the school and the teachers have a tough time keeping up with the students' access to AI. School safety remains a top concern for parents. What additional measures, if any, would you support to improve student and staff safety?
Okay, so let's break it into two pieces. So let's break it to the capital side first, making our buildings and structures secure. So thankfully, the taxpayers approved that 7-year additional sales tax, half-cent sales tax, which we used. We created an A, B, and C list for hardening projects that needed to go into our schools. So those lists have been completed. In addition, we continue to update. We are really the envy of the state as far as the money goes for hardening our campuses. We are also the envy of the state for our plan for security, our staffing plan, and our overall plan for security of our children. I've been twice to the State Safety Summit. It's a national summit that the state of Florida runs. When you tell them you're from Martin County, they're in awe of what we have. We really have the platinum plan in Martin County. Our Martin County plan costs, I think it's $4.5 million is our agreement with the sheriff. That's less than $2 a day for a student to have this premier safety staffing. When you think that a student gets, so take the $9,000 that we get per student and take that by 180 days, that's $500 per day that you have per student, right? $500 per day is what a student has.
Okay.
So to say that out of the $500 per student, $2 of it, I mean, I think that's a bargain price for what we've managed to put together. And I think after the I'll call it a false alarm, but after the drill, let's call it a drill at
Okay.
Jensen Beach High School,
Mhm.
we know that the students are trained. We know that the staff is trained. We know that our police and law enforcement respond in the manner that we expect. I mean, everything went and proved to us that in what could have been a horrible situation, everything went the way that we expected it to go. I mean, so you can look at it and say, you can keep getting more and more. Should there be metal detectors? Should we do, I mean, you can go on and on and on. We continue to update. We continue to converse with the sheriff as far as whether it's the capital expenditures or whether it's the staffing piece. But I think that we're in Martin County, we're hands down the leader in the state of Florida for school safety.
I hadn't heard that $2 a day figure before, and you're absolutely right. That is a bargain for protection, and especially the level of protection our students are receiving. So, appreciate you sharing that. Now, would you support expanding into the Guardian program?
Uh, I think it's something that, well, so here's the trick is, it's something that would have to be discussed with the sheriff. That's the thing that, our plan is based on what the sheriff has recommended to us, is us working with the sheriff and coming up with what the staffing piece looked like. When we originally looked at this whole thing, and I remember I was the board chair at the time. Ed Campy was the chair of the county commission. We met with the sheriff. It was Lori Gaylord. We were all in a room and we discussed, well, okay, well, maybe we could like cobble together or put together some kind of plan that uses some law enforcement officers and uses some guardians and uses this, that, and the other. And the sheriff at the time was adamant that, you need a single chain of command. This is the way we need to go. We need to work together so that we know that what we're doing works well for our students. We know what we have now works well. To expand on that, I really think we would need to defer to and have the discussion with law enforcement and with the sheriff as to where we go from here. But for a individual school board member to say one thing, first of all, we have no power as an individual board member. That's one. We only have power collectively as a group. But I really think you need to let the professionals help us do what the professionals know how to do.
How should the district balance parental rights with the judgment of education professionals?
So I'm trying to understand what your question is. So we know that we have parental rights in the state of Florida. right? We know that the parent is the primary person who directs the education of their child. So, what question are you trying to ask me?
So I think it's a case where if a parent has an issue with something that's happening in the school, but it's a school policy, I hate to give a specific example, although I think I could just as a parent
Okay,
with
so let me
experience.
let me help you with that. So we do get a report as required by the state on a quarterly basis that tells us when a parent has had a problem in a school and wants their classroom moved, for example. I'm having a problem with this teacher and I'm requesting that my child not be in this classroom. And we also see so we see which schools they're at, how many have requested that, what the resolution was. Was it moving a desk? Was it moving the child? Was it, and obviously even though we don't control the operations of the school, that's delegated statutorily to the superintendent, we are still interested from a policy and budget standpoint. We're interested in whether there is a pattern, for example, if there is a pattern of students that, well, look, we don't have this, but imagine if you had half of the class is asking to be out of this teacher's classroom. Obviously that would be something that we would want to know. So we have that report that's coming to us. We have parents that are very able to say what they want for their education for their child. And we have some guardrails that are established by the state where for example, let's say it's ideologies. We are not to instruct individual ideologies or to promote individual ideologies on our school campuses. Students can do whatever they want, but we can't have staff promoting whichever it is, whether it is a certain religion, whether it is a certain political view, whether it is a certain country view, whether it is certain, we don't have that. That's just something that we don't have ideologies. And it cuts both ways. So you may have an ideology that you approve of. Let's take religion, right?
Hmm.
You may have
Right.
one that you approve of and one that you don't approve of, you know? Well, if I allow all ideologies to be promoted in school, you're going to be subjected to the ones that you don't approve of, in addition to the ones you do approve of. So we aren't given the luxury of picking and choosing ideologies. We're just across the board that this is what we do. This is the state step. This is the state requirement. This is what we investigate if something happens that goes outside of those guardrails. And children are allowed to express themselves. Parents are allowed to say, for example, I don't want to celebrate this holiday. I'm going to take my child home and my child's not going to be in school that day for that holiday. Okay, fine. You're completely at your right to do that, you know?
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. Library books and instructional materials continue to be a topic of debate throughout Florida. What standards should be used when determining whether materials remain available in schools, and where do you believe the line should be drawn?
Okay, so first of all, I'm going to talk about Martin County and the way we do it in Martin County. So in Martin County, all children have a lanyard with a badge on it, with a pass. That pass identifies them. That pass helps them when they get on and off a bus, so we know which bus they're on and where they are. It helps them in the lunch line so that if they're getting food, they can swipe their pass and the pass will tell them, no, you can't have dairy or, you're not allowed to have this or whatever. The pass is also used in the library. Parents are allowed to say what they want their child exposed to as far as reading materials go. I'm not talking about instructional materials. I'm talking about reading materials first, okay, media materials. So you can say, I want my child to have access to everything. You can say, I want my child to have access to nothing. You can say, I want my child to have access to only these things, or I want my child to have access to everything except this. And it sounds burdensome. It sounds like it's a big monster to conquer. But with the technology of that badge, it's not difficult. It's not difficult when you walk up to me with a book that your parent says that they don't want you to see, and you try to check out the book for me to say, no, honey, let me find you another book. It isn't difficult. The same way that if you were allergic to peanut butter and you walked up to me with a peanut butter sandwich, I would say, no, honey, let's put this down. Let's go find something else because this isn't something that you're supposed to have. So we have that in place. We also have in place where it's posted on our internet and on our websites, all the books that are in the library, all the books that the teachers have. So a diligent parent can go through that and say what a child is allowed to have, what a child is not allowed to have. Okay, so that's how we're doing things in Martin County. The state took action a while back because what they discovered that as books came to a school or came to a classroom, they came from all kinds of sources. So books that were purchased by a media specialist or by a school or given by a PTA, there was some type of vetting process that that book went through. But you also had books that showed up when Joe next door died and his wife brought over a couple boxes of books and set them out front and they brought them in. When a teacher left and she had some books, or somebody was moving north and they had some leftover books, because books are kind of like shoes to people who read, me included, that there is no number that's enough. So you just want more and more and more and more so that you have lots of choices. Well, in doing that more and more and more, we probably ended out with some books that either nobody was interested in, books that were not appropriate for whatever the grade level was, et cetera. So the state stepped in and said, okay, we're going to change this. We're going to make it so that you can object to a book, you can object to having something there, then it will have a process that it will go through, a transparent process it will go through, and the disposition of that book will be decided. Personally, for me personally, I don't believe in banning books, but I also understand and respect a parent's right to say which books they want their child exposed to. So I think that's where we have found this middle ground of where we sit now as far as the books go.
Yeah, that was an excellent solution.
Instructional materials are a little bit different now. So there's two processes. One is core instructional materials. There's a very prescribed method by the state to adopt core instructional materials. So what happens is the state has a review committee where they decide, let's say it's going to be biology. The state decides which publishers and which books are approved for use in the state of Florida. So there may be 6 different publishers of a biology book that are being offered. Then your local community has a process where they can weigh in, whether it's teachers, students, parents, retirees, etc., where they can look, they can review what is being proposed, and they can give opinions to it. So then that all goes through a process. Then that is announced of the books that we are considering. Then there's another point at which we say, okay, this is the book that we're planning on adopting, or we are adopting this book. Then there's a 30-day legislated period of time where somebody can object to that. That has to go to an administrative law judge who will then decide whether this is workable, not workable, who wins, who loses, etc. I do have to say that in Martin County, it's always, even way back when my grandchildren were in school, our district has been very amenable into parents saying what they don't want their child exposed to. The best example is nuclear energy. So nuclear energy is presented one way in the textbooks, but because we have a nuclear plant just north of us where a lot of people have their livelihood, their feelings a lot of times were, I don't like the way your textbook is approaching this. When you approach the school and said to them, hey, this is our livelihood, this is the way we make a living, I don't want my child learning this. The schools have always been very amenable to, I understand that, I can respect that, let's see if we can work around that, we can do something else. So that's always been the way that it is. The actual standards that we teach come to us from the state of Florida. So the standard of how we teach and what things somebody's supposed to know about nuclear power or about any particular subject come from the state of Florida. And the only standard that you can really opt out of is the sex ed standard that a parent can say, I don't want my child. It won't negatively impact the child's performance. So for instance, I can say, I don't want my child learning the standard that has to do with nuclear power. But if it's a standard in the state of Florida, they will still be tested on what's on the standard. I have the right as a parent to not have them subjected to that and to not have them listen to that, but I will have a consequence of my grade might be lower because they didn't know the right answer that the state wanted them to know for that particular standard. If it's a subject that is not a core subject, so it's not reading or it's not English, math, science, or social studies, so it's not a core or history, I guess. If it's not a core subject, so let's say it's art or something else, there's a lesser adoption method. In Martin County, it pretty much mirrors our regular adoption method with the look back, et cetera. The only thing it lacks that 30-day piece where you can ask a judge to rule on it.
The Matt Theobald matter generated significant public attention and strong opinions throughout Martin County. You were serving on the school board during that time. Looking back, do you believe the board handled the situation appropriately? Is there anything you would have done differently?
So we received direction from the state, which we follow, right? I am one of the people who voted that it go to the administrative law judge. I still stand behind that decision. I don't believe that any of the five of us have a law degree or the appropriate background, and I think that was the appropriate venue for that to be heard in.
The renovated Martin County High School pool is a significant community asset. Do you believe it should be opened more broadly for affordable swim lessons, recreational swimming, and community access? If so, how would you balance the community use with student programs, and how should the cost be funded?
Okay, so our pool is open. The Martin County High School pool is open. It's had the renovations done. It's in beautiful shape. As you can imagine, we have insurance requirements as a school district. So our insurance covers our students. We belong to an insurance pool. It covers students, right? So we have what we call a facilities use agreement where people can come and use the facility. A group can come in and use the facility. And there's varying levels of charge to that, whether it's just for students, whether it's for a nonprofit, whether it's for somebody to make money. So whether it's a classroom, whether it's the pool, etc. When you use a facilities use agreement, you need to bring an insurance certificate. You can imagine if, let's say, your homeowners association wanted to have a meeting in the library at one of our schools because they don't have another place to meet. And so they were coming there, they could sign up, they could pay a nominal fee, which really takes care of the janitor and opening and shutting the building, and you would be able to have your meeting there. But in order for you to sign up to use that meeting, you would have to give us an insurance certificate, because if one of your people fell down, hurt themselves, etc., it needs to be your insurance that's paying for it and not our insurance that's paying for it, right? So we've had that agreement in place, and there is a local swim group, which has used the pool on a pretty consistent basis until this last renovation. And that group was using it through the facilities use agreement. I know that there was a discussion, and I've talked to several people of, well, why don't you give the Martin County pool to somebody else? The problem is the Martin County pool sits on a piece of property right next to where a road that connects the two sides of the property, right? Canner Highway to Willoughby. So if you carved the pool out and gave away the pool piece, not that anybody's talking about doing it, but if you did that, you would have to redo that road because you would still need that access to be able to drive all the way through, right? And if you carved that out, you're carving it out with no parking. The parking that it uses is parking that we use for school personnel, students, faculty, etc. So how do I give you an asset without any parking? I mean, so it becomes, I can't, right? So it becomes do I think swimming is important? Yes. Do I remember the days, or do I know of the days when swimming was a thing that I think it was third grade or something? Third graders all went on a bus. If you could swim, you only went one day and you never got to go back. But if you went and you pretended you couldn't swim, you got to go every day for a whole week. And you got a little bit better and you got to swim. So some of those kids knew how to game the system so they could go swimming every day. When Dr. Millay was with us, we discussed what that looked like to bring it back. It really cuts into core instructional time. It cuts into what that looks like and how that, and it would require a larger discussion with our insurance carrier as we are giving swim lessons. There's a whole packet. It's not as simple as let's just start doing this tomorrow. It doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work that way. So I believe that our pool is open for use by other people. I believe that anybody can use it that wants to. We've had issues in the past with people who've come to use it who didn't have an insurance certificate. And it's like, I'm sorry, you can't use it if you don't have an insurance certificate. We've had people come and they've said, we want you to hire this person to be the pool manager. And it's like, well, we hire our employees based on what our qualifications are and who they report to, et cetera. We don't take hiring recommendations from outside people. You can be a reference if you want to, but it's best if you let the entity that's supervising the person do the hiring of the person that's doing that. So,
what qualities do you believe are most important in an effective superintendent, and how would you evaluate whether the district is moving in the right direction?
So I think probably three things. I think one is student achievement, right? If the students are moving in the right direction, if you're not leaving children behind, if you're managing to get student progress. The second thing has to do with the running of the organization. He is tasked with running the organization. He's the operational person for the district. So that requires, in the world that we're living in now, that requires structuring an organizational chart and a management system that works well together. It requires defining to employees what they need to be doing what they should be doing, etc. It requires making the tough decisions of when they're not doing it, when somebody's not working out, when it's not, the performance isn't there, or whatever, making that tough decision of maybe it's time that somebody move on or somebody stay, that type of thing. So I think the organizational piece, I mean, and I think that's in today's world, when you're not dealing with a government entity, a strict government entity, you're dealing with a for-profit business pretty much with a defined revenue stream, where you're trying to make customers happy. When you're living in that environment, it's more like the private sector than it is like the public sector. So you need to have that mindset. And I think the issue becomes employees that go into a school district may be coming from a government mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And not from a private industry mindset. And there really are two different mindsets. I mean, it really is the way you do things and that. So, I mean, I think that's the second piece. And I think the third piece is the governance team and the community. So the third piece is being able to define a vision to the community, being able to be transparent to the community, providing information, being able to present a unified governance team, an approach of this is the direction we're going, being able to find it, being able to define it, being able to have everyone behind it, being able to promote the district. I mean, it's you might have the most glorious accountant in the world who can run a business, but in today's world, you need the person who can be out there in public, who can promote it, who can talk about it, who can explain it. And I think those are kind of like your three buckets that you would look to.
Okay. Looking ahead 4 years, what would success look like for Martin County schools?
Success for Martin County schools would be those sub scores. So our sub scores, the components of the pieces that work into what the grade is, right? Which then measures specifically third grade or the lowest quartile in a school, those things. Continued progress in the right direction for those things, right? So I think in 4 years, that's important. In my personal opinion, also, we've started a lot of work on frameworks and structures that explain things, whether it's to the public or whether it's to school board members. I think especially with the term limits for school board members, that's going to be crucially important. I mean, the work that I've worked on to get let's start with COVID. So when we had COVID federal funds that came from the federal government for COVID, most other districts threw up their hands and let that be handled internally. Staff decided, the superintendent decided. This board took it very seriously that we're responsible for policy and budget. We came up with a elongated spreadsheet that had every single thing from any different department, different metrics, what would work, what wouldn't work, what was a primary ask, what it would look like when the funding for that went away, etc. So we kind of owned the funding. We kind of owned it and took ownership of that. You see it with our budgeting. We have a budget book, which most other districts don't have. It's a framework so that you can tell, you can look, you can compare school to school, you can compare staffing, it goes back 10 years in retrospect. So you can tell, have the number of assistant principals grown? Have the number of students grown? What does that look like? I mean, it gives you a whole, but I think those type of frameworks, not just for the public, but also to help a school board make decent decisions or wise decisions with the correct information that they can assimilate, is really something that's helpful and something that's meaningful. And I think that continuing to build out those systems and continuing to build those things that the public can see and that school board members can use, I think really is like the underpinnings of a good governance team.
What is one issue facing Martin County schools that you believe is not receiving enough public attention?
How well we are doing. I think that's what I think that, you always, take a restaurant. There could be 100 happy customers and the one whose iced tea didn't have enough ice in it, he's the one that you hear all about. I think it's the same thing. I think that when you start digging down and when you start looking and when you start, whatever it's attending, whether it's attending a football game, whether it's going to a show at a school, whether it's going to a graduation, whether it's looking at the numbers, whether it's looking at the student progress. All those things, what our campuses look like. We just rebuilt 2 elementary schools that are state-of-the-art elementary schools, with all the safety things in place. And I don't think most people know that. They don't know what that looks like. They don't know. And people who are happy tend to just be happy. They're happy that they're happy and they don't have to do anything else. So I think that's probably our biggest thing that we don't necessarily do as well as we could do. But I think we're in a learning curve. I mean, I think we're transitioning, especially with vouchers in the last 2 to 3 years. We're transitioning from a full government entity to fully embracing a revenue defined business
Right.
and having to treat it like it's that business.
Right. Right. How much time should students spend on screens during the school day? And do you think we become too dependent on technology and education?
Yes, I think we've become too dependent on technology and education. I think it's like it was the bright, shiny object. Everybody embraced it. The state embraced it. The state had a categorical for it and said, you need to spend this money on technology. When the grandchildren were little, we would never have spent $1,000 for a child's cell phone. Now it's like, why wouldn't you spend $1,000 for a child's cell phone?
Right.
I mean, it's just so it's just the technology is here. I think that it does two things. One is it's your connections, your ability to connect with other people. One of the most interesting letters that we got when we did the no cell phone policies in schools were students who said, but now I will have to talk to people during lunch. It was kind of like, yes, that's right. That's exactly what you're going to have to do.
That's
Yes.
crazy.
Knowing that you have to still take a test on a device means you still have to have some level of competence in with the device. And that includes for our youngest learners, and that includes for people who might not have the technology at home. So you still have that. I think as far as when I went to school, if I was going to write a report about Spain, I went to an encyclopedia and I got my information. But now that information is so readily available, my report about Spain would not be basically that basic report. It would be more the delivery.
Hmm.
It would be more how I can put that so that it's attention grabbing. So it's something so I think those are the pieces where technology has advanced us to that really are beneficial. The difference between me saying, okay, pick up your handout and turn to page 2,
Right.
and being able to show you a video with things zooming in and zooming out and time lapse things and that type of thing. I mean, I think so there's a mix between the two. And I think those type of skills, those presentation skills are going to be really important for high school students to be able to have going out into the real world because face it, I mean, there's no employer who you're going to be able to hand something and say, look on page 3 and it's like, I'm not looking for that presentation.
Exactly.
You've done nothing for me. Yes.
Right. Looking back at your time on the board, what's a decision you're most proud of and one you would handle differently today?
Decision I'm most proud of, probably putting both referendums on in the same year. So, there was a big discussion as to whether do we do one and then wait and put the second referendum on? Which do we put on first? Do we go in for capital? Do we go in for operating, et cetera? And I'm very proud that we decided that we would do both at one time. It took a commitment by the board at that time to promote both of them, to explain both of them, and to kind of take people from really a zero knowledge base of the way that things work to understand exactly how it worked to get some buy-in. It took a ability to give some transparency and to be able to define exactly what we were going to do and do exactly what we said we were going to do to gain that trust. I mean, if you look back in the voter records, all the other referendums were, we want more money for essential operating expenses, for critical needs, and it was like so vague. You had
Right.
no idea what you were paying into. And I really think by clearly defining it, by slicing it down to exactly what it was going to be, by being transparent with that, I mean, I think we did a really good job with that. I think proudly we were able to retire the sales tax, the half-cent sales tax after the 7 years. Every other district in the state was saying to us, why are you just picking 7? And we said, we live in Martin County. We only need 7. We can tell you exactly what we're going to do with 7 years of money, and then we're done. We don't need to keep going.
Right.
And we don't need to be telling our voters, we'll just hold it for you. Just keep giving it to us. We'll hold it. We don't need to be doing that.
Right.
On the operational side, the extra up to $500,000, we redefined that from the strict $500,000 to up to $500,000 so that we could collect only what we needed. We've gained reauthorization for that twice, the next one coming up in 2028. So I'm really proud of that work that we've done there. And then your other half of the question, something that I would have done differently.
Right.
I probably wouldn't have overestimated what the board was doing when I first joined the board. So when I first joined the board, before I took the job on, I read the statutes. I read the 2 3-ring binders of all the policies. So I kind of felt like I had everything tabbed, in my OCD obsession. I had things tabbed for contradictions, for things that were expired, for things that were, et cetera. And then when I got there and I was all excited, that, okay, when are we going to do this? And everybody kind of looked at me like, you got like way too much time on your hands. We don't do that. And I was kind of, I think that because it's a political animal, that most people don't know when they run for the office, they don't really know what they're running for and they don't know what the job is when they get there. And it's kind of, so even the first go round when it was, will you raise taxes to pay teachers more? It's like, okay, wait, do you understand the way that it works? It's like, the only way I'm going to be able to raise taxes to pay teachers more is by doing a referendum. Yes, I'll do that. But I'm not going to be able to just sit up there on the dais and say, let's collect more money to do this. And I think a lot of times because it's a politician, you want to make everybody happy. So you say things that you think are going to make everybody happy. And then you find out that, oh, that wasn't within your power to do. And you had 4 other people that you needed to do something with.
So last question, here we are. Why should voters renew your contract for another 4 years?
They should renew my contract for another 4 years because I have proven my leadership. I've done exactly what I said I was going to do. I have the expertise. I have the experience. I've done what I've said I'd do. We're moving in the right direction. We have a governance team that's working together. And I think we have more work to do.
And Christia Li Roberts, how can voters support your campaign and learn more about you?
So they can call me on my phone, 772-528-1088, or they can find me on Facebook, or they can go to my website, or they can email me. It's Roberts, Roberts, the number 4, kids, kids.com.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Very informative. I've really enjoyed this interview here today with you. Appreciate you taking time out of your day and wish you well on the campaign. And I just want to remind folks, please, you need to vote on August 18th. All of our races in Martin County will be decided at the primary. There will not be a race to decide on in November. So make sure your voice is heard. Let's get out and get some record numbers this year for our primary. Everybody, please get out and vote. Again, it's going to be August 18th. And if you support Christia Li Roberts, she certainly would appreciate your support with her and to vote or whichever candidate you want. Just please vote. And finally, don't forget, follow the Casey Ingram Show on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube for more real talk you won't hear anywhere else. I'm Casey Ingram. Stay informed, stay engaged, and I'll see you on the next episode. Thank you, Christia Li Roberts.